Great. So what we are going to do is just, some of you probably have some idea on cloud computing. You probably also used already Heroku. That is just one other way to get, sorry, just I'm changing space. And then you probably know or probably even used some other ones, which are the most common. I mean, the most famous probably is AWS, Amazon Cloud, but you have also others like the Azure, which is also very coming aggressively, and then Google Cloud. I think the Google Cloud probably have used it one way or another, knowing it or not, through their email service, through their G Suites. Like, I mean, the Google Drive is part of the Google Cloud, right? So you have many of the Google flavors that you have used. But before I start, I just want to know how much people know and how much they used, and the kind of concepts that they find. Like, so usually if you I would say if you understand something, it means you have a use case for it. And if you don't have a use case, that means, or if you don't have a problem that you would want to use it, then you, however someone tells you, you're not going to find it useful because it's not your problem, you know. It's like, imagine diagnosis, if you're not if you're not a medical person, just any issue about syringes and their tubes and whatever is not going to be your problem, you know. It's like, and then as soon as you start really using, even if you're not a medical person, but then as soon as you start using syringes for like transferring care to others, and then suddenly you start finding it useful, because then knowing a little bit about the syringe property and which syringe is like, you know, important, and how probably it's kind of moving slowly, whatever, changing kind of becomes important, right? Because then suddenly it's your problem and you get interested in it. So until you find some use case, it's theoretical knowledge. And so to just get, for me to have a feeling, for you to have like kind of use cases in the things that you're doing, how do you see cloud computing? And in particular, we're talking AWS, you know, what do you envisage to use it? If it's just only, you know, if you, probably the current issue you may have is just getting an account because you don't have credit cards and stuff, but you probably would want to use it for a certain, and I want to understand how much you know and what would be the things that you would like to use. So just feel free to unmute yourself and can someone, who's that? Can you unmute it? Manchester is winning maybe, but okay. So can we have some participation? It's afternoon for some of you, late afternoon, for the others early afternoon, but let's just make it interactive. Hello? Yeah.
So basically, like for this week challenge, I've been trying to take my database to the cloud, though I don't really have much knowledge about it. And I'm hoping to actually learn about cloud computing, because when I try running some of these queries on my laptop, you know, before you start running large database on a laptop, before you know it, the storage will just get filled up, and the system starts hanging. But with cloud, the service provider handles everything, the RAM, the storage, and everything, just similar to Google Cloud. Your Google Cloud distributor running in cloud. So basically, it takes away that headache of talking about RAM and other stuff. With a 2 gig RAM laptop, you can actually run 5 gig or 10 gig of data with Google Cloud and stuff like that. So I hope to learn more about cloud computing, because to actually help me when I have a lot of data and I want to minimize a lot of data.
Okay. So who else, if you have used it in the past, for what you used it and what was the challenge that was concepting to understand? Or if you have taken a course or anything, what are the concepts that you understood?
Can I go?
Yeah, go and get on.
Yeah, so for me, it was the first time I was using cloud. So we were contracted to build something to do mental analysis from Twitter, mental status analysis from Twitter. So we needed our script to be online, and they requested that we download the tweets themselves. So we used AWS. One of our teammates suggested use AWS, so configured such that the tweets are going straight there, and then it was able to like just run continuously and also collect for us the data without having to have them on the local machine or the organization investing in buying their own resources, hardware resources. So it was very good for us.
Yeah, great. I think that's what is really good use case. And I will come to just this server concept, which of course you probably some of you have already experienced. But yeah, exactly. You can use it as a server, and you can definitely use S3, which is their basically hard disk, like the cloud hard disk, you can call it, as where you can dump your files. Definitely another advantage you just mentioned now, which is important, is that if you are running something there in on the background, its internet is reliable, right? So you can basically, it doesn't go through your internet, it just goes. So for example, if you want to download a 1 gigabyte file, then in your broadband, in your network, it would take you a long time. Let's say even a terabyte, okay? And a terabyte, basically, you may not ever, with your bandwidth, be able to download it. But in the case of AWS, because they have they are in an area where they have high bandwidths, and you just only pay, but you won't have any of the issue that you will have. You can just stream. So even when you install in Google Colab, that's what you see. Like you install, a software like using pip, it just installs immediately, because within Google Cloud, connected to the internet, it's the Google internet, right? So it's kind of whatever speed they have. So you don't worry about that. So that's one other advantage, where you actually may have very little, just very low broadband, but at the same time still can work with huge data because it doesn't pass through. It's just everything you do it in the cloud. So that's one advantage. Great. What else? Who has used or have an experience? Just share your experiences, just so that we get something. So who have used Google or AWS or Azure, Microsoft Cloud? I mean, it's not about nomination here, more like if you have used it, just good to. So Stephanie, do you have, I think Stephanie is here. Yeah, she's here. Anything you want to share? Maybe her network, maybe she's not able to talk, I don't know. But who else? Like, okay, yeah, please just can unmute. And what do you mean by that? Like in terms of resources?
Well, I'm setting up different devices to use, and then connecting now to the device from your computer now to that device. So like in essence, you're using a PC, but it's not your PC that you're using. But the resources are like the RAM you want and the space that you want on the device.
Yeah. Okay. Any other person who wants to share? I have never used Azure, but I assume it's similar. So any experience with that is good as well. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay, can I give an example?
Yeah, Otome.
So there is in Cisco networking,
yeah.
So there is this Meraki dashboard. So the devices, the routers and the switches are on premise, but the monitoring, even the cameras are on premise. But now everything is collected to the cloud. Every data, every action, every event that happens, it's collected it's saved in the dashboard. The dashboard is in the cloud. So you can pass commands through the dashboard, and it affects the devices on the premise.
Yep. So I think all of these concepts, like especially if you are from computer science, and if you have done any of the networking, that concept really becomes useful. Some of the network switch becomes sometimes just another instance. So and I think the terminologies, what we are going to cover in this one is going to be exactly those just terminologies, and I'm just going to go through where things are in AWS just so that you can see it. But so we are going to be a lot more covering here now, and more like exactly these terminologies, which you exactly know what it means, networking. But networking is big area, like how you network your different resources are important in the basically in the cloud, and that's really one aspect. And you can be just only networking in the cloud, right? It's just a huge field in its own. And you can also basically that resource allocation, but also security is another big area, right? Where you basically have to secure each aspect of it, and how data is kind of even including in its storage, how you're going to do like when you transfer data, as well as also just who is having access to your network, because everything is controlled via some kind of, you specify a configuration file. And that's a difference. Like when you are working in your computer or in a server, even, you sometimes may not know, you may not have the full control. But in the cloud, you can have, like, depending on what you need. So you can have the same as what is Heroku does, just simplifying everything. Yeah, okay, good. I mean, I understand, Stephanie. So if you have your network issue resolved, you can just tell us. And so you can have basically from maintaining every single aspect of your system. So that means including you can create your own LAN, like the kind of the local area network type, which you just basically connect every of your devices, and each of them having a local IP, and then you will have like one global IP probably, and then kind of connect with everything. And so the security, basically what is kind of to the outside can be outside connected, what is the public facing and what is the internal facing, and how you set up that's the architecture. So you design your own architecture. And in AWS language, that is the virtual, the VPC, virtual private network, or virtual private thing. Like, I don't know, let's see what stands for, I forgot. Just gotta search.
Virtual private cloud network.
Cloud, exactly. So you can have your own mini cloud, basically. So and in that one, you will. I mean, I'm just gonna show you just how you. And then not only that, you can actually do all of that through a configuration file, right? So you can write basically some kind of code that would just tell exactly how to commission each of these aspects. So that's kind of, you can use the CloudFormation. That's another service where you basically do write aspect by aspect or line by line how you're going to commission, and you tell exactly how you're going to, kind of connect them. So basically everything you can do it just like any other program. You can just commission an infrastructure or your virtual private cloud, basically. And not only one cloud, you can have multiple cloud, which like these VPCs that you can connect actually through them. You can tunnel through these clouds, like, or your VPCs. Usually that's what you do. For security, you will have one dedicated VPC for one aspect and then another VPC for another aspect, and you try to connect between them, right? So yeah, just without further ado, I'm just gonna go share, I think, my entire screen, maybe. Okay. So that's basically what you would get, right? When you are just going, and then you basically could go and create your account. And the good thing about AWS, if you have a credit card, is that, or if you can have just you have for 1 year free tier. So that basically it gives you one instance and many things, basically for many practical reasons that would be useful for you. Just you will have for 1 year for free. You don't have to pay. So you can create your own instance, you can host your own website, whatever you want to do. It's just like you will have a computer which is 1 gigabyte. So let's see what is free tier. So this is so basically what you will have. You will have a 5 gigabyte S3 and 750 hours of free. That is basically, and then just if we do that, so T2 micro. Okay, so yeah, you will have all of most. So this is, for example, the different aspects. When you say EC2, usually this is the elastic container. That's basically the computing machine. It's basically where actually everything happens is in the elastic container. So this why elastic, usually when you see the elastic, it means you can, without bound, you can increase by changing either memory. You can change the RAM, you can change the disk, which is, and then you can change also the CPU, the number of CPUs and stuff. You can even connect many of them together, and you can have your own thousands of clusters basically running. So that's it's just everything, the heart of the computing happens in EC2. Different services kind of takes into account this EC2 as their basically computing platform. So that's where whenever I'm going to say EC2, or just in this case, I'm just talking about the computing part. S3 is exactly what I said. This is the part of the hard disk, basically, or the external disk that you can put, and it's a fast and secure, durable, scalable, that you can put as petabytes and more of data on that. Like you just have to pay, and it's cheaper as well. It's like if anything is, and you can even host your static website using just Amazon S3 buckets. And then RDS is basically the relational database, and that is where you have basically our 10 Academy is hosted there, and I will show you just now. Maybe just here. So I'm just gonna. So this is like in the 10 Academy one, and so there are many services. You may get completely overwhelmed if you don't know what you're searching for, because you can even have your own ground satellite station, right? And you can have your own quantum technologies. You can have for Internet of Things. So there are many services that you can commission. And the mostly what we use is just EC2. For example, so this is the dashboard that you would get, and we have our own VPC. So that there are almost always there's a default VPC, but it's advised that you create your own VPC, which is the virtual private cloud, to host your thing. In our case, for example, this is the so let me just go. The 10 Academy website is hosted in one so what is going on? So this is basically what you will get, all the information, right? So the private DNS, the public DNS, and this is the VPC ID. So that is what we set up. And if you look at I'm just going to come back to it, but so you basically have all the information you need there. And just like if you use Docker, just like the Docker image has you have like basically the operating system that you would use is kind of, we call, mostly it's image, and that image you can have it, you can create your own image from, using Ubuntu, for example, image, and pre-installing everything you need, and then kind of package it as an image. Or you can use, almost always the recommended, or what I recommend usually is that you use one of the public given or Amazon image, and then dynamically you load it. So that's kind of like you write like a bootstrapping code, which just basically when it loads, it inputs everything that's necessary, right? So it's just like you install always dynamically instead of cooking everything in one big image. That way you can maintain a code and everything becomes like easy, right? So, and then you will have basically the key name is just basically, this is SSH key. So next week we are gonna ask you to basically experiment with this, right? So we're gonna set up an AWS account and we ask you to generate SSH key, and you get in, you SSH and you do something. And that's where you have to just learn how to generate SSH. I think it's easy. Just like you will have SSH is like, you will have two keys. One is a private key and another is a public key. And the public key, you give it to us, such as we put it in the cloud, and then, or that is in the instance, and then you SSH using your private key. So that kind of is kind of like a type of password, but more secure password, right? Because it's, yeah. So you just learn a little bit of SSH, how to do SSH and how to generate, and then you will be next week more likely to have hands-on practice on that. And yeah, basically just all of the information about the thing, the number of CPUs that is running is 1, and the capacity, whatever is just there. I mean, so in this case, we don't have accelerators, but we can also add GPUs, whatever necessary there, right? If we are using this instance for, let's say, machine learning case. In this case, just it's a server, and it basically have, yeah, it's kind of, we don't need much. And then there are volumes. So these are AMIs, what I call. So the AMIs are different images. So we had a number of images that we created. It's also a backup. And so some of them are just basically, most of them are like the Amazon image, on top of that, having our own software, right? And then IP security groups, that's what I was talking about. You create a number of security groups that basically specify how each of your things connect. For example, how your database is connected, how is it accessible to what? So I'm just gonna, for example, look at one of the, this is, for example, our web security, right? So this is how you specify how things are connected. So in this case, for HTTP, the protocol, the port range, and because we define everything has security, like in terms of the, like for example, the public, like I didn't talk about it, but it's like, so this is the public, what is it called? Load balancer. And the load balancer has its own security system that anything that comes from, so this is, for example, HTTP and port 80. So this is the inbound rule, and there is an outbound rule. So this is what I call, what earlier I said, the networking. In the inbound rule, I specify anything that comes from the load balancer on this range can connect with this instance. Anything that comes with HTTPS, with this port, and coming again from a load balancer can connect. By specifying this, and SSH in this case is just anybody can connect with SSH if they have the key, right? That's not a recommended one, but that's what is set up here. Now, what is really interesting is that now that basically specifies that no one else can connect to my instance outside just with HTTPS and HTTP, and they have to connect only through a load balancer. What does a load balancer do? A load balancer basically is just really kind of, it protects you from DDoS attack and all that things that you just put in front of it, and you can make it again that one quite, whatever you want to do. So our load balancer is actually sitting in front of it. Also, there is another one, another system that we protect ourselves. So these layers of securities basically will help you to kind of protect yourself. And if it's a database, for example, I'm just going to go to the database, for example. So skill database, right? So the database, it only connects only if it is from the web. So that means from instances that are running in that VPC. So that's what is just this one is defined. Only them. So from this VPC, inside only this VPC, all instances from this VPC can connect to the database that we have, but not outside. No one from outside can connect. So this is how you secure your database. So of course, what it really means is just, I'm talking now networking, just for those of you who have done networking in computer science or other courses, exactly. So it's really about all securing your internal. If something is breached, what does it mean? How long does it take to, it's all that thing. But that's what you're going to set up everything, and you can use it for. At first, I would recommend just to set up everything through the console. That means from the web thing. But otherwise, then once you get familiar with the concept, you go to basically CloudFormation and you specify everything because you understand it. And then there are a lot of the load balancers. You create a load balancer with a specific, like basically in the, let's say, earlier I was talking about this. So the load balancer, you specify who's, what it is, like the ports it's listening, and then also like the parts that just gonna move this thing. So, and then I'm just gonna actually so let me try to action edits now. Okay, so if I do this, maybe. So, for example, if I can change a like, let me try to get more. Let me just get here. So for the load balancer is basically a system that you connect which instances it's monitoring. It's the reason why it can also auto scale is that you can specify a target, how many instances of the same type it should keep, and then it tries to monitor the health of the instance, and then it kind of can automatically increase if you are, for example, wanting, like for example, if you expect a lot of traffic, you can make it like to always just break at a certain rule, saying like if the the CPU of one of my instances is running more than 50%, then make another instance such that you serve the same website from another instance, such that it's kind of scalable. That's why when we say scalable, that and if one of the server dies, just automatically increase another one. So that's what is called durability or scalability when we are talking about the EC2. So you can basically scale starting from a small website that just doesn't have anything. You can scale to be Google just because you can scale it like arbitrarily. You just pay, but that's it, right? And so you can have a launch configuration. That means when a new instance, earlier I said about that, when a new instance is starting, how should it start? Like, installing the softwares and do this, do that kind of specification. So this is what EC2 is, and it's basically almost, when you start, basically you're mostly working on this, on this part, on this service, which is basically having your computer or your computing instances, right? And then another one that I was talking is S3. S3 is basically where your all files are located, and you create different buckets, and each of the buckets have a target. That means you have basically if you make it public, anyone can access because it's a unique, the bucket has to be unique. So globally. So which means you can actually use it, your buckets, by just putting index files in them. You can basically have a static website hosted in that. And basically it's there, it's your folder, right? It's just like hard disk. So it's you can assume it like a folder, we have the CSV just here, I'm just showing you, but it's like you can basically create arbitrary ones and they can host anything, like any, petabytes of data, and that's not a problem, right? So that's another major resource that you're going to use. So I'm talking about Amazon, but it's also when you go to Google, it's the same. When you go to Azure, it's the same. You will have like some hard disk thing, just like an equivalent of S3, and then you will have an equivalent of EC2, the computing node, and then you will have also a database one, which I'm just gonna go. So in the database, so here is the compute, here is the storage, and the data. You have, of course, many types of databases, and some of them can be like cache types. Like, so for example, elastic cache, if you know about that, you could actually associate to your instance a cache that is much faster and kind of, so for example, our Moodle instance had its own cache because we wanted to make fast like serving, like because it needs a lot of data fetching from a database and stuff. So we used a lot of cache to make it fast. So that's how you could use. So, but I will just go RDS, which is just the main database that you're using at the moment in your project. And we have instances. So this is exactly what, for example, one of the wiki database that Oswald is trying to do is this, the wiki one. And the WordPress is exactly our database, just which is for our website and some other things. In the past, we had many more for Moodle stuff. So your Moodle thing that you are using was once kind of an instance here, and everything was just in there from the Moodle. And now we stopped it because we are not using it, but that's what you are using. So you can basically connect. If you look at one of them, you can basically, it's again in the same VPC. So that means all of this for the 10 Academy things, like more of the kind of the website related things, were under one VPC, and they all are connected. They all have their own, private. So it's kind of the subnets, and they have their own private IP address. So you can just talk to each other, and all of them are linked to a specification of security. So within inside the subnet, you can connect, but outside, you have to only just come to the VPC through the basically the load balancer. So you cannot get in otherwise, or through the SSH, just for maintenance admin security. But this is basically just, you can see it has like the CPU usage and all that part, and you can monitor even from here. So maintenance and backup, you can basically have almost every monitoring that you can do. So for example, if the usage, the kind of the write and IOPS basically, such that you can actually monitor from this how much people are coming and how much, if there are a lot of traffic, you expect a lot of kind of reading, because you are basically just, every page is basically has to be pulled from the database. So that's what you expect. And basically this is the CPU utilization, and you kind of monitor, and that's how you pay for Amazon, by just your utilization. Okay, and you can have really a lot of logs. So that's just So, and that is the RDS. So the database part. But then you can, of course, have your blockchain or whatever. But another part that I want to go, which is more important when you start, is that the security, identity, and compliance. So the IAM, which basically is maintains basically your, if I am inviting all of you to our cloud, this is where I manage whom to invite, how to generate their thing, and kind of what kind of role I am giving them, what kind of security group they will have, what kind of basically just everything I control here. Because like I would say like, okay, permissions, policies, I attach it. It's a huge concept, and it's, I would say like, it is the one aspect that you would struggle in the cloud at first, because this is where like everything you want to do something, and then you may not have the kind of permission, and then like you have to ask, and it's kind of understanding this part is basically, it's the IT part of it, right? So on a normal server in a company, IT managers are kind of managing who is able to log into something, who's able to see something, and this is your cloud, your entire thing, right? So it's basically where a lot of the key concepts are here, and it's really just, this is where I would say, if you start understanding IAM, it's the same also. It's not just only Amazon, but everywhere. How you kind of, what is permission, what is role, how you define roles, and each roles are like, have basically each, it's not only when we say users, it's not just humans, right? It's everything, every service that is able to, any program. In Google, for example, if you just write any script, that script needs to have its permission, role, and stuff like that. And so it's like everything, every instance, everything has like, read is one permission, write is one permission, right? And roles to, on behalf of you, asking something, doing something, that means automating something requires a certain role. And that's where it gets, interesting, in that you need to understand that aspect, okay? So I will stop here, because it's a lot of things I'm just covering, and I'm not sure how much you're following, but I would then continue with you asking and just directing in which direction we should go. How far are you able to understand, or like, what is something that's confusing you? And if you have an, again, experience that you had done and where you had challenge, just let's share that now. Hello, Kura, are you?
So I don't know if you can just shed some light on difference between Azure.
I can't hear you. I hear you barely. So.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Okay. Basically, so I think around July or thereabouts, I got this Global African Scholarship for Cloud, and the basic thing that actually made it to be complete was the IAM, what you just talked about. So I think that was just what turned me off and stuff like that. Just push it aside and then face other stuff. So I think that is my main issue. IAM and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I can't. I unfortunately I don't understand you much, because it's too slightly noisy and quite low volume. Maybe type it. Okay. So you already typed it. Actually, I mean, it's. I don't want to get into that kind of discussion, which is better. It's true that at the moment AWS is probably the market leader and well established and has a lot of thing, and by usage, it's probably AWS. But I think Azure is coming quite a lot, and GCP is also. It's so. I would say it's up to. IAM is just basically the user. So it's, so when I create a user, for example, just like mine, right? Then there is so many things what I can do. Can I change my own password? Can I, like, so for example, this is the and the way that is specified, and is, is like, you can make it an admin. It's the same as Moodle. In Moodle, the same, like the user, how you specify users, kind of, there is merely, as I said, everything you do is kind of controlled by what do you have permission to run it. Let's say, in Linux. So everything here, I'm talking usually in Linux terminology. In Linux, there is this, I mean, the same probably as Windows, is that you basically control every single, to which group does it belong. And you can have group permission. you can have user-based permission, and then you can, that basically means executing a certain file, like, or reading a certain file, writing a certain file, like in a disk, where, and all these are kind of permissions, right? But then here in the cloud, you have also just some kind of like, you have systems, not only just one disk, but you have also multiple systems. Can a user can, for example, run a machine learning in SageMaker? It's like that basically depends on, can a user create some kind of the elastic, like create its own instance in the EC2? Can they create a bucket? So because of this, and then at the same time, it's also like, can they actually commission even a new, basically a new VPC? And all that is what IAM controls. So the first thing is, of course, you create a user, but the user can be a normal user, a human user, but also it can be a system, right? It's just with, can be a role that basically have a specification, and then it can do or perform things on behalf of you. And so there are different types of roles as well, just here. So for example, this is AWS service role for auto-scaling, right? So just let me, so just the ones I created just to, so for example here, then there is also like, again, like the, just let me just look one of them, just to give you an idea and how it's specified. And it's basically not only that, you also want to store your password, right? You sometimes, to go from one point to another, you need some kind of security details, and those details sometimes are stored somewhere in AWS Secret Manager. And who's able to get and pull that secret manager is another security. So you basically have to specify all those things in this kind of JSON format, and then you specify, you can allow, you can bulk allow, or you can just basically specify exactly the parts that are, and this is what is policies and permissions here. And the trust relationships are, again, I mean, it's quite, I think if you ask me a specific question, I can tell you more, but that is basically the only way is just to get it. Just next week you will, being a manager, like an IT, a cloud system manager is quite different, because then you have to really manage it yourself. Like if you have multiple users, you have to specify all of them. But normally, if you have already a manager, then they just give you, and you only have to know, okay, to know where is your permission, and if something is not working, to know to ask that permission, or if you have the permission already to set, then to be able to set. So that's the basic requirement. But if you are setting up for example, for a startup, you have your own startup and you're doing everything in Amazon, then you definitely need a lot more understanding of the IAM, because that's where all pieces come together. All the kind of assigning permissions, whatever comes there. So you have to understand it. And I'm sure it's not answering your question, but yeah, I think it's similar, it's just larger. Like in a computer, in your own computer, still every system, every of your software, like who's accessing what is there, but you only need to set like, okay, user, and the user has certain permission, and the systems that are interacting are smaller in your PC, while in a cloud it could be a lot, because there are many services, and each of the services have different sub-services and stuff like that, and that's what makes it complicated. So the understanding that is very important if you are especially managing your own AWS account. Any other question? Or was it useful? Did you learn something? And if you don't, what would you have, what would you have liked to hear? And how would it convince you to, to start learning? And I would say, like, what is something that a concept that you sometimes struggle to understand? And it's usually through that it gets better than me telling you this and that, because yeah, without actually you having an account. Yeah, exactly. So the goal is basically to get familiar with certain concepts, and next week we invite you to do some things in AWS. So especially just use, you will have SSH access, and you will have S3. You will basically have to download your Twitter data in S3 and run your scripts using Screen, so that even if power is off, that's it, it's running. And so be able to, independent and fast without at all network issue, you can download everything you want, right? So of course we give you some limitations, but what I'm saying is more like you don't have to, actually cloud is the equalizer in this case. Like you don't have to have big infrastructure to do something amazing, because everything you can do it in now, as long as someone pays for it, right? So and then if you make profit, definitely you can pay for it. So it's, so we will demonstrate, not only demonstrations, basically, because we want you to do something like without any limit, so without a limitation of your computer. So we try to set up AWS instances where you can just connect, and you will connect, and then you do basically mining using your just normal code, your Python code, but just in AWS. And then again, another thing is that if you have introduction now, so next time when you need it, it's easier. So you have, basically, you will know where to start. So that's another important concept. Any other question? Okay, so if not, then we'll stop here because of time, and just try to read around IAM in AWS, as well as EC2 and S3. Just those are the main two services we'll use next week. Great. Ciao, everyone.